Hey everyone, it's Monday. Happy Monday to you. Right after a Thanksgiving week, I'm sure you're just as thrilled as I am to have to jump back into that work grind. This is your friend Joseph Craven here for the numbers game on Running Out the Clock, or OTC Sports. In case you noticed, no, we did not put on an episode today. That's because we were a little bit delayed getting back home from the holidays and needed a little bit of time to recover. So instead of recording on Sunday evening at the end of rivalry weekend, that's right, I tried to say it correctly this time, we have decided to go ahead and push the recording session to Monday night with an episode release on Tuesday. So don't worry, it's coming along. It's just for now, we had to, I don't know, rest and recover because I think everyone was getting into fistfights all weekend long. That's just kind of the spirit of Thanksgiving, isn't it? No better way to celebrate a holiday based around gratitude than getting together with all of your closest football friends and punching each other in the face. Anyway, this is the numbers game. That's where we avoid opinions, or at least pretend to avoid opinions, except for when it comes to how there's inevitably always an Alabama player in the SEC Players of the Week. And we talk only about the numbers and statistics that happened in this past weekend of play. And to do that, we have to look at scores themselves. Here's the quick scoreboard rundown before we get into the details of each game. Mississippi State defeated rival Ole Miss 35-3 on Thanksgiving Day. Missouri blanked Arkansas 38-0. The Razorbacks winless in the conference this season. Georgia defeated in-state rival Georgia Tech 45-21. Florida also handled their out-of-conference rival Florida State 41-14. Alabama and Auburn, not very thrilling in the Iron Bowl this year. 52-21 was the scoreline there. Alabama defeating Auburn. Vanderbilt, in a game that we, by the way, completely forgot to even predict in last week's episode of ROTC and somehow completely overlooked it. That's straight up disrespecting the doors is what we just did. But Vanderbilt defeated Tennessee 38-13 to become bowl eligible. Good on you, Vanderbilt. South Carolina fell to in-state rival Clemson, 35-56. That was the final score there. But Kentucky able to defeat their ACC rival Louisville, 56-10. So, wow, Kentucky dropping 56 points. Got to be their highest scoring outing of the season, right? Just blankly or blindly stating that, I haven't bothered looking at it. It's probably not true at all. And then in the wild one, was it 7 overtimes? Texas A&M upsets LSU 74-72 in a game that I guess according to some people wasn't even an upset. Wasn't A&M favored in that game? That's stupid. Anyway, here are the numbers for all of those individual performers in all of those games. First up, the Egg Bowl between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. On the losing side of things, as mentioned, this was 35-3. Pretty much all Bulldogs the entire game. Ole Miss able to get a field goal in the second quarter, and then, of course, at the end of the third quarter was the absolute debacle of a situation that we will talk more about later on that would have been an Ole Miss touchdown, but then was overturned. So on the losing side, quarterback Jordan Ta'amu completed 8 of 17 passes for 87 yards and 1 interception. He, of course, was pulled from the game, and they let freshman quarterback Matt Corral play a good deal. Corral ended 5 of 8 passing for 65 yards, also 1 interception. On the ground, Isaiah Woolard led the Rebels in carries with 11 and yards with 63. Behind him, though, not a whole lot going on the running game. Corral credited with 4 yards. Elijah Moore, wide receiver, credited with 2 yards on 2 carries. And star running back Scotty Phillips, who's been battling injury, 4 carries but only 1 yard on the day. Along with that, he's listed as a tight end. He was, of course, at one point in time their quarterback, or one of the backup quarterbacks, but Jason Pellerine, he did have 1 1-yard carry. A.J. Brown on the day had 4 receptions for 61 yards. DeMarcus Lodge, 3 for 54. Tight end Dawson Knox added 3 catches for 28 yards, and Elijah Moore, 1 11-yard reception. Woolard had 2 catches on the day, but did not have any positive receiving yards. On the other side, quarterback Nick Fitzgerald went 11 of 18 for 111 yards and 1 touchdown. A whole lot of ones in that stat line. 1 out of 18 for 1 and 1. Anyway, Fitzgerald also had 117 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on 18 carries, a 6.5 yard per carry average. Kylan Hill, 17 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown, 6.4 yards per carry. Aries Williams, the senior running back, seeing some playing time, 11 carries, 64 yards, 1 touchdown, 5.8 yards per carry. And Nick Gibson, junior running back, 3 carries, guy who had a really good game against Arkansas. 3 carries for 16 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. Also 2 carries, only 4 yards for large senior running back Dontavian Lee. I say large because, I mean, he's like 6'1", 230. So he really is just, kind of he's the power guy. Anyway, through the air, wide receiver Jesse Jackson had 2 catches for 31 yards to lead the Bulldogs. Stephen Guidry, 125-yard reception. Dedrick Thomas, a senior on the receiving corps, had 2 catches for 23 yards, one of those being a touchdown. I'm sorry, Dedrick Thomas is only a junior. He is not a senior. Fellow junior Keith Mixon had 2 catches for 19 yards. Kylan Hill had 2 catches for 12 out of the backfield. Farrod Green, 2 receptions for only 1 yard. He's the Bulldog tight end who has done literally nothing this season. So the Bulldogs very much focusing on the run game and able to handle things behind their defense. 35-3. In the Friday game, Missouri defeated Arkansas 38-0. Arkansas only 2-10 on the year, 0-8 in conference play. Missouri jumped out early and never stopped. So let's look at the statistics for the Razorbacks. We actually saw most of the playing time going to quarterback Connor Noland, a freshman from Arkansas. He went 5 of 17 passing for 98 yards. Ty Story attempted 7 passes, completed 4, only had 24 yards on the day, 1 interception. And the most efficient thrower for the Razorbacks on the day was their wide receiver, Devion Warren, who attempted 1 pass and completed it for 13 yards. On the ground, they were led by the return, really, of running back Devwell Wiley, 13 carries for 54 yards. Behind him, they had Malik Williams, a freshman running back from Florida, who had 4 carries, 27 yards. Devion Warren added 2 rushes for 10 yards, and Rakeem the Dream Boyd, normally their go-to running back so far in the season, 5 carries, 5 yards. Devil Whaley added 2 catches for 61 yards out of the backfield. Their main wide receiver, Michael Petway, 3 catches, 29 yards. Cheyenne O'Grady, their tight end, had a 17-yard reception. Freshman wide receiver Coylin Jackson had 1 catch for 13 yards. Deion Stewart added 2 catches for 12 yards, and wide receiver Jared Cornelius, 1 catch, only 3 yards on the day. On the other side of things, though, however, Drew Lock ending his regular season well with the Missouri Tigers. They are 8-4 on the year. They will go bowling. And Locke went 16 of 25 for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns, adding more to one of the most successful statistical careers the SEC has ever seen. Taylor Powell stepped in for the Tigers. He's a freshman quarterback, actually from Fayetteville, Arkansas, oddly enough. So he came in and played, attempted 2 passes, only completed 1 for only 6 yards. Larry Roundtree III led the way on the ground with 29 carries for 119 yards. Tyler Beatty, a name that we hadn't seen quite as much in recent games for Missouri, had 5 carries for 42 yards. Drew Lock himself added 2 rushing touchdowns and 12 yards on the day. A couple of other Tigers had some carries, but nothing of note. So moving on, Emmanuel Hall, their wide receiver, had 6 catches for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. Big game to end the regular season for the senior wide receiver. That's what you want to see from your receiving leader, who, of course, had a lot of injuries this season to deal with. John Johnson, a wide receiver, added 16 carries. 16 yards on 2 catches. Good grief. Pull it together, Craven. Pull it together. Tight end Kendall Blanton had 2 catches, 15 yards. Freshman wide receiver Barrett Bannister, also from Fayetteville, Arkansas, 2 catches, 12 yards. Do you think Missouri was trying to play a bunch of Fayetteville boys just to taunt Arkansas? I don't know. Roundtree added 2 catches out of the backfield for 10 yards. And finally, their tight end, Daniel Parker, another freshman. He got in the statistical category, the statistical column, with 1 9-yard reception on the day. Georgia defeated Georgia Tech 45-21. The Bulldogs really hitting a stride heading into championship weekend. Quarterback Jake Fromm, no surprise here, 13 of 16 efficient, not very many passes, 175 yards, and a stupid amount of 4 touchdowns. Good grief. But oddly enough, freshman quarterback Justin Fields went 2 of 3 for negative 13 yards in what is probably the strangest stat that you will see today. On the ground, DeAndre Swift had 14 carries for 105 yards, 1 touchdown, 7.5 yards per carry. Not to be outdone, Elijah Holyfield, 9 carries, 79 yards, and a touchdown, 8.8 yards per carry. And after that, well, the Bulldogs got pretty creative on who all carried the ball. James Cook, who is a freshman running back, stepped out there for 7 carries, 39 yards there. Jason Stanley, a wide receiver, carried the ball 2 times, 35 yards. And Akil Crumpton, another wide receiver, 1 12-yard carry as well. Fields added 10 yards on the ground. Mecole Hardman led the way for the Bulldogs through the air. Only 1 catch, but 44 yards and a touchdown on that one. Isaac Nwata, their tight end, 4 catches, 36 yards. Terry Godwin, another wide receiver, 2 catches, 30 yards. Jeremiah Holloman, name that I always mess up on this podcast because I want to call him Jeremiah Harlerman. Anyway, he had 29 yards on 2 catches, one of those for a touchdown. And then another tight end, Charlie Werner, came in and caught 1 15-yard pass. After that, Riley Ridley, 2 catches, 9 yards, both of those catches, red zone touchdowns. Florida defeated Florida State 41-14 to advance to 9-3 on the season. They were led, of course, by Felipe Franks, 16 of 26 passing, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns. So good for Franks ending the season strong in what has been an up-and-down year for him. A sophomore quarterback by the name of Nick Sproles, not to be confused with Darren Sproles or Nick Foles, came in, attempted 1 pass, did not complete it. LaMichael P. Ryan had 13 carries for 129 yards and a touchdown, 9.9 yards per carry. Just could not get that clean 10-yard average. Oh well. Jordan Scarlett, 20 carries, 88 yards and a touchdown as well. Franks added 46 yards on the ground. For reference, for anyone that has forgotten, Felipe Franks coming into this season had 25 rushing yards on his career. So 46 is in one game. That's really, really nice for Franks. Damian Pierce, their freshman, had 5 carries for 15 yards, and Kadarius Toney had 1 5-yard rush. Through the air, they were led by 2 wide receivers who, also got injured in the game at different points. Trevon Grimes had 5 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. Van Jefferson, 4 catches, 92 yards, 1 touchdown as well. Kadarius Toney added 2 catches for 21 yards. He is their all-around playmaker they like to use in various ways. And then the third receiving touchdown on the day goes to Josh Hammond, wide receiver. He had 2 catches, 12 yards, and of course that score. LaMichael Pirine, 1 6-yard reception on the day. And their tight end, Ciante Lewis, had a 3-yard reception as well as they defeated their in-state non-conference rival. You know what? Let's keep going with some of the non-conference games and look at South Carolina and Clemson. Clemson, of course, defeated the Gamecocks 56-35, but it actually was pretty close here. South Carolina struck first and went up 7-0 in the first quarter. Clemson was able to get up 14-7 by the end of the first, 21-7 at the beginning of the second quarter. However, South Carolina actually scored a couple of touchdowns in the second quarter. It was 28-21 at halftime before the Tigers of Clemson kind of ran away with it. 2 third-quarter scores for Clemson, another score early in the fourth to go up 49-21. South Carolina able to get a couple more touchdowns, as it went on, but the closest they got again was 49-35 before Clemson scored late to ice things. Let's look at the Gamecock statistics on the day, and this is huge. Jake Bentley ended his regular season by going 32-11-1 of 50 passing for 510 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's incredible. I think if they were playing a conference opponent, he would have been a shoo-in for Offensive Player of the Week in the SEC. But, of course, the SEC tends to gravitate closer to players that played a conference opponent if they can. On the ground, running back Mon Denson carried the ball 17 times for 62 yards. Rico Dowdle behind him, 4 carries, but 49 yards on those 4 carries, making the most out of his touches. Star receiver Deebo Samuel, 10 receptions, 210 yards, 3 touchdowns. Go on with your bad self, Deebo Samuel. Shea Smith also added 9 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown. So, oh, my goodness. I mean, South Carolina wide receivers and Jake Bentley just having themselves a heck of a performance here. That's the type of performance that apparently makes Clemson fans really angry at Dabo Swinney for absolutely no reason. Why would you ever get mad at a coach like Dabo Swinney? Keel Pollard, their tight end, 2 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown as well. And then it starts to taper off a little bit behind them, just a little bit. Brian Edwards, another wide receiver, 5 catches, 41 yards. Denson and Dowdle both had the exact same stat line in the receiving game, 2 catches, 16 yards apiece. Kentucky destroyed a really bad Louisville program. They jumped out early. It was 14-7 at the end of the first. It was 35-10 by halftime. And the final score ended up, of course, being 56-10. Terry Wilson went 17 of 23 for 261 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception on the day. Breakout wide receiving star Lynn Bowden Jr. attempted 1 pass as well for the Wildcats. However, it was not just incomplete, but an interception. So, not a great idea. Asim Rose, oddly enough, had the most yardage for the Wildcats on the ground. He had 10 carries for 112 yards. 1 touchdown, a very nice 11.2 yard average. That, of course, is boosted by the fact that in the fourth quarter, he had a 75-yard touchdown run. Benny Snell Jr., their go-to running back, 18 carries, a clean 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on the day. Wilson added 79 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries. And we actually got to see even more Wildcats running the ball because they did so well, including freshman Keviasi Smoke, which is maybe the coolest name I've heard all season. He was able to step in, carry the ball 4 times. Hey, why not? 45 yards and a touchdown. Lynn Bowden Jr. also added 7 rushing yards. But Bowden excelled through the air. 6 catches, 86 yards for 2 touchdowns. Josh Ali had 3 catches, 59 yards, 1 touchdown as well. Their tight end, C.J. Conrad, had 2 catches, 59 yards. Dorian Baker, 2 catches, 21 yards. Asim Rose, 2 catches out of the backfield for 16 yards. And David Bouvier, 1 16-yard reception for the Wildcats as they dismantled Louisville. All right, jumping back into conference play, we got a few more games to cover here, such as the Iron Bowl. 52-21 was the final score, Alabama over Auburn. It was tied at the end of the first. It was close at halftime, 17-14, and the Crimson Tide opened it up in the third quarter. 2 quick touchdowns to go up 31-14 before Auburn could respond on a 52-yard pass from Jarrett Stidham to Darius Slayton, 31-21. But then late in the third, just a minute after Auburn's score, Tua Tagovailoa connects with Devonta Smith for a 40-yard touchdown to go up 38-21. And in the fourth quarter, it was all Alabama. 2 more touchdowns to ice the game, 52-21. Auburn put up a good fight, unable to make it happen when it counts in the second half. However, let's look at Auburn's stats. Jarrett Stidham, 13 of 30 for only 127 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not a great outing for Jarrett Stidham. Ryan Davis, a wide receiver, attempted 1 pass. And hey, what do you know? It's a 23-yard touchdown. So sometimes those plays do work. Sophomore quarterback Malik Willis came into the game. Only attempted 1 pass for 3 yards. On the ground, Tre'Tavious Whitlow, 19 carries for 61 yards. Sean Shivers had 10 carries for 27 yards. Fast wide receiver Anthony Schwartz, 3 carries, 20 yards, 1 touchdown. Quarterback Malik Willis, 3 carries for 18 yards. And running back Cam Martin, 2 carries for 12 yards. Darius Slayton through the air had 2 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown. Whitlow out of the backfield, 2 catches for 27 yards. Running back Malik Miller had one 23-yard touchdown reception. That was from wide receiver Ryan Davis. Ryan Davis himself had 4 catches, but for only 15 yards on the day. Eli Stove, 2 catches, 12 yards, and Schwartz added 3 catches for 10 yards. For the Crimson Tide, Tua Tagovailoa went 25 of 32 for 324 yards and 5 touchdowns. As well, Jalen Hurts came into the game late, only attempted 1 pass, but it was a 53-yard touchdown to Jalen Waddle to ice the game for sure with about 9.5 minutes to go. So Hurts, one attempt, 1 completion, 53 yards, 1 touchdown. Running back Damian Harris led the way with 9 carries, 41 yards. Behind him, Josh Jacobs, 5 carries, 28 yards. Tagovailoa added 4 carries for 26 yards, 1 rushing touchdown on the day. Najee Harris, 7 rushing attempts for 25 yards, and Hurts added 1 3-yard rush as well, as the Crimson Tide really focused on throwing the ball a lot. Jerry Jeudy, 5 receptions, 77 yards, 1 touchdown. Jalen Waddle, as mentioned before, had 53 yards on 1 reception, which is impressive enough. On the day, he ended with 3 total receptions, 73 yards, and that 1 touchdown. Devontae Smith, 4 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, 40 of his yards came on a touchdown pass late in the 3rd quarter. That really opened the ballgame up for the Crimson Tide. Henry Ruggs III, 5 catches, 62 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Jacobs, the running back out of the backfield, had 4 receptions, 53 yards, and a touchdown. Wow. Irv Smith Jr., their tight end, 3 catches, 27 yards. Vanderbilt defeated Tennessee 38-13. And honestly, Tennessee didn't show up until the second half. 17-0 at halftime, Commodores up. Tennessee got a big-time 75-yard touchdown run from Ty Chandler early in the 3rd quarter to then get a little bit closer, get within 10 points. Nothing else happened in the 3rd, though, and as soon as the 4th opened up, Vanderbilt capitalized with another touchdown to go up 24-7. Just about 5 minutes later, they get another touchdown. It's 31-7, and it's pretty much done. Tennessee unable to really make anything happen consistently here. Let's look at their numbers on the day. As Tennessee misses the postseason, and Vanderbilt ends up being bowl eligible. Tennessee 5-7 on the year. Jarrett Guarantano went 13 of 29 for 139 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Keller Christ came in the game, attempted 4 passes, completing none of them. As mentioned, their running back Chandler, 7 carries for 88 yards and the 1 touchdown. That means Ty Chandler, most of his yardage came off of that 175-yard touchdown to start the second half. Tim Jordan added 5 carries for 27 yards, and Guarantano did not add any yardage at all. I should not have mentioned his name. Negative 12 yards on the day. Wide receiver Juwan Jennings had 2 catches for 51 yards. Marquez Callaway also 3 catches, 36 yards, 1 touchdown on the day there. Josh Palmer there, another wide receiver of theirs, 2 catches for 22 yards. Their tight end, Dominique Wood-Anderson, 3 catches for 14 yards. Jordan Murphy, 2 catches, 11 yards. And Tim Jordan, their running back, added 1 5-yard reception as well. On the winning side, Kyle Shermer for Vanderbilt. Get ready for this stat line. 31 of 35. Jeez. Only missing on 4 passes on the day. He hit it with 367 yards and 3 touchdowns. Go on, Kyle Shermer. Have yourself a game. Kyrie Blasingame led the way on the ground. 20 carries, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. Keyshawn Vaughn, 6 carries, 25 yards. Donovan Tennyson, a wide receiver, added a 1 rushing attempt for 8 yards. Kalijah Lipscomb, 5 attempts, 6 yards, 1 touchdown. And finally, 3 rushing attempts and 3 yards for Jamari Wakefield. Freshman wide receiver C.J. Bowler had 6 receptions for 93 yards. Remember his name. It'll come back up later in the podcast. Lipscomb added 8 catches, 86 yards. Blasingame, 6 receptions for 62 yards. Amir Abdurrahman, 2 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown. Tight end Jared Pinkney, 4 catches for 40 yards, 1 touchdown as well. And Keyshawn Vaughn, a stat line of 33 receiving yards on 2 receptions. Finally, we have the big nasty 74-72 7 overtime game between Texas A&M and LSU. This game had its own fair share of controversy that we will talk a lot about in this week's episode, but let's just look at the statistics. First of all, for the losing side, Joe Burrow, 25 of 38 for 270 yards, 3 touchdowns. Running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 1 completion on 1 attempt, 11 yards, and a touchdown as well. On the ground, Burrow rushed 29 times for 100 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. So that's 6 total touchdowns for Joe Burrow and 7 overtimes. My goodness. Nick Brossette, 16 carries, 61 yards, 1 touchdown. Leonard Fournette, not Leonard, but Leonard had 2 rushes, but for 48 yards. Edwards-Helaire added only 3 rushing yards on 3 rushing attempts. And their go-to wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, had 1 3-yard carry. Jefferson threw the air more efficient, 5 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. Foster Moreau, their tight end, was right behind him. 4 catches, 51 yards, 1 touchdown as well. D. Anderson added 2 catches, 33 yards, 1 touchdown. Jamar Chase, 3 catches, 31 yards. Leonard Fournette added 2 catches out of the backfield, 28 yards. Interesting they'd be using him more at the end of the season, but, I mean, that's their choice there. And Torrey Carter, that's their fullback. He had 2 catches, 23 yards, a touchdown. On the other side, Kellen Mond, 23 of 49 passing. Not necessarily a great number there, but 287 yardage. That's a pretty good number. 6 touchdowns. That is a great number. On the ground, Travion Williams, 35 carries for 198 yards, 2 touchdowns. I am shocked more players didn't drop dead of exhaustion in this game. Kellen Mond added 42 yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. Courtney Davis, wide receiver, 7 receptions, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jay Sternberger, their star tight end, 5 receptions, 75 yards, 2 scores as well. And then the big story of it all is wide receiver Kendrick Rogers, 3 catches for 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, and those catches that he made were absolutely the definition of clutch. Jamon Osborne, another wide receiver, 5 catches, 37 yards. And then, what do you know? Why not get their fullback involved as well? Not to be outdone by Carter on LSU, their fullback, Cullen Gillespie, had 1 18-yard reception. Cameron Buckley, another wide receiver, added a 5-yard reception on the day as well. Whew! Those are the scores. My goodness, what a weekend. So what does that mean for the polls? Well, simply put, I mean, not a huge amount of change across the board aside from, LSU and so on and so forth. Let's look right here. Alabama holds steady, number 1 in both polls. Georgia is back up in the top 4 in both polls. They're at number 4. They move up a spot as LSU and Michigan both plummet. Florida's at number 11 in the AP, number 10 in the coaches poll. That's a couple of spots up as well. LSU has dropped to number 12 in the AP poll, down 4 spots, down 6 spots in the coaches to number 14. Kentucky's number 16 in the AP poll and number 15 in the coaches. They've moved up 3 spots after defeating Louisville. Don't really know why they'd move up that much, but okay. Mississippi State is in both polls here and in the regular season ranked. Number 20 in the AP, number 19 in the coaches poll. And Texas A&M, after that big victory over LSU, back in the polls, number 22 in both spots, in both polls, unranked last week. In the AP poll, Missouri received 88 votes, and that's about it for the conference. In the coaches, they received 33 votes, and again, that is all. So, how about the players of the week in week 13? On offense, we had dual offensive players of the week. Kyle Shermer of Vanderbilt and Tua Tagovailoa of Alabama. As per tradition, has to be an Alabama player there. Kyle Shermer completed 88.6% of his passes against Tennessee. Incredible percentage. It sets the record for completion percentage in a game for a Vanderbilt Commodore, which conveniently was also a record Kyle Shermer already held. He completed his first 15 passes, including a 17-yard touchdown to tight end Jared Pinkney to help the Commodores to 17-0 advantage at halftime. In the fourth quarter, he passed the ball 2 touchdowns, Amir Abdul-Rahman and tight end Cody Markle. That was not mentioned in the box score. Why didn't they mention Cody Markle in the box score? Stupid websites. Anyway, those 2 fourth quarter touchdowns sealed the deal for Vanderbilt. He's the first Vandy quarterback to notch 3 victories over Tennessee since Oliver Kuhn in the 1920s. It has not happened very often. In 4 starts against UT, Shermer is 87 of 134, which is about a 65% completion percentage, for 1,275 yards and 12 touchdowns. In the last 4 games of the season, against all of those against SEC opponents, Shermer went 90 of 123 for 73.2 percentage for 199 yards, 11 touchdowns, only 1 interception, ending the season strong. It is the first time Vanderbilt has defeated Tennessee 3 times in a row since 1926. Tua Tagovailoa counted for 350 yards of total offense against Auburn, whose defense was number 10 in scoring defense leading up to this matchup. 6 touchdowns. That's a school record, tying the team mark for passing touchdowns with 5, adding a rushing touchdown. He completed 25 of 32 passes. That's 78%. Rushed for 26 yards on 4 carries. He still has not thrown an incompletion in the fourth quarter this season. Granted, he doesn't appear in the fourth quarter this season, but he did go 2 for 2 for 32 yards and a touchdown in this particular matchup. So it was his 5th 300-yard passing game of the season. That is an Alabama school record. On defense, we also had, once again, co-defensive players of the week, Jordan Elliott, a defensive tackle in Missouri, and Devin White, the linebacker at LSU. Elliott for Missouri was a one-man wrecking crew, as the SEC calls it in their press release. 5 tackles, a career-high 4 tackles for loss, and a career-high 3 sacks. So this man was living in Arkansas's backfield. In the second quarter, he blindside sacked Arkansas's quarterback, which resulted in a fumble picked up by Missouri, returned for a touchdown. It's 21-0 at that point. Still 12 and a half minutes left in the first half. Whew. He had no sacks on the year, 4 tackles for loss in the first 11 games of the season, which means he doubled his tackles for loss and added the first sacks he had all season long. Arkansas had negative 21 rushing yards in the first half. That's the lowest first half rushing total by any FBS team this season. Devin White for LSU had a career-high 17 tackles, including 4 for loss in a 7 overtime game. I think it's more notable that he even survived the entire game. That seems like that would kill me to play anything that long. He had 1 sack on the day, forced a fumble that resulted in a 58-yard return for a touchdown by Michael Divinity. That tied the game at 24-24 in the fourth quarter. He went over the 100 tackle mark for the 2nd straight year. Braden Mann was the special teams player of the week. No big surprise here. Texas A&M's punter is phenomenal. He punted 5 times, an average of 52 yards and a longest of 59 yards. One of those punts killed within the 20-yard line. He is on pace to break the NCAA season average record held by LSU's Chad Kessler in 1997 at 50.28 yards per punt. After this game, he is averaging 51.1 per punt. He already this season established a new NCAA record with 14 punts of 60 yards or more, breaking an old NCAA mark set by Ryan Plackmeyer of Wake Forest in 2005. Freshman of the week is Vanderbilt wide receiver C.J. Bowler. Single game career high 93 receiving yards on 6 catches. 5 of his 6 receptions, including a 41-yard catch that was the longest of the day, resulted in Commodore first downs. His 31 receptions on the season is tied for the 5th most ever by a Commodore freshman. On the offensive line, we had co-offensive lineman of the week, Eric McCoy of A&M and Elton Jenkins of Mississippi State. 2 centers. Look at that. McCoy led A&M to 234 yards on the ground against LSU. He only as a whole, they only allowed 2 sacks on the night on a total of 51 pass attempts. So if you're dropping back 51 times and you only get hit twice out of that, that's not bad, especially when the game is as long as that one was. Jenkins of Mississippi State was the top offensive line grader in a 35-3 win at Ole Miss. He collected 2 knockdowns, did not allow a sack or a pressure, as the Bulldogs rushed for 309 yards on the ground. 420 yards, solid, okay, of total offense. That's the highest output in a conference game this season for Mississippi State. Jenkins, noteworthy here, according to ESPN's Mel Kiper, is considered the number one center in the 2019 NFL Draft. Another Mississippi State Bulldog, Jeffrey Simmons, was the defensive lineman of the week in the SEC. He finished the game with 4 tackles, 2 for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 1 pass breakup, and 1 quarterback hurry. Wow, that's a whole lot of things to fit in. That's a lot of categories. He finished the season 14.5 tackles for loss on the season. That's the most for Mississippi State, 4th most in the entire SEC. He had 30 career tackles for a loss up to this point. That's 7th best in Mississippi State history. And while he is a junior, he is expected to go pro after this season. So we'll see what else lies in store for Simmons. All right, I think on that note, the only thing that we have left to discuss are the stats. This is the end of the regular season, so this will be the last time that we go over the completion numbers, the passing yardage. This is the last time we'll really have to go over that on the year, because after this, that's it. I mean, this is how the regular season has ended for all of the teams in the Southeastern Conference. So let's just look at it, and we'll start where we normally start, passing yardage. At the end of the season, Ole Miss quarterback Jordan Ta'amu has ended the year with 3,918 yards to lead the conference. A solid almost 800, at least 700 something yards more than the second place performer, and just a hair under 4,000 on the year. So Ta'amu ends the season with 3,918 yards. Tua Tagovailoa of Alabama is behind him with 3,189 yards. Drew Lock of Missouri, 3,125. Kellen Mond, 2,967 yards. And Kyle Shermer of Vanderbilt, 2,844 yards to end the season in 5th place. A notable thing here, Jake Bentley throwing for 500 yards put him up in 6th place. He was able to jump past a few other performers on the list. As far as passing touchdowns go, well, that's Tua Tagovailoa, who leads the SEC, the conference, that's what I was trying to say, in touchdowns with 36. Drew Lock in 2nd place with 25. Jake Bentley and Jake Fromm, the Jake and Jake show, South Carolina and Georgia quarterbacks, tied in 3rd place with 24 passing touchdowns on the year. Kyle Shermer, Felipe Franks, and Kellen Mond all tied with 23 passing touchdowns behind them. So there you go. Jordan Ta'amu, the leading passer in yardage, ended the season with 19 passing touchdowns. We hadn't really talked much about interceptions here, so let's just throw it out there that Ty Story and Jake Bentley led the conference in INTs, throwing 10 of them. Terry Wilson, Drew Lock, Kellen Mond, and Jordan Ta'amu behind them with 8 apiece to round out the top 5. None of that matters, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. At the end of the season, Travion Williams of Texas A&M's your leading rusher in the SEC with 1,524 yards on the year. Kentucky's Benny Snell Jr. had 1,330 yards to be in 2nd place. Nick Fitzgerald, the quarterback from Mississippi State, is in 3rd place in the conference with 1,018 rushing yards. Larry Roundtree III of Missouri, 1,012 rushing yards in 4th place. And in 5th place, Keyshawn Vaughn of Vanderbilt, 1,001. Oddly enough, those are also the only players in the conference to have broken the 1,000 yards rushing mark during the regular season. A couple of players do have over 900, so if they are in postseason play, they have a chance to maybe get over that. And in particular, that's DeAndre Swift of Georgia, Nick Brossette of LSU. Elijah Holyfield of Georgia is a hair under 900 with 896 rushing yards on the year. Ole Miss running back Scotty Phillips, who led the conference in rushing for a good chunk of the year, due to injury, did not play much of the last few games. Ended the season with 928 yards, of course, will not be in a bowl game. So that is the end of it for him, just under 1,000 yards on the season. As far as rushing yards per attempt, Keyshawn Vaughn averaged 7 yards per carry this year. DeAndre Swift of Georgia, 6.9 yards per carry. Najee Harris of Alabama, 6.8 yards. Elijah Holyfield of Georgia, 6.7 yards per carry. And Kylan Hill of Mississippi State, 6.6 yards per carry in 5th place. Very notable that DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield, both in the top 5 in the conference in yards per carry, in particular because, of course, they are on the same team, and that team is a run-heavy offense. So that says quite a bit about Georgia. Travion Williams also ended the season with the most rushing touchdowns with 15. Benny Snell Jr. and Nick Brossette are tied with 14 rushing touchdowns apiece. Scotty Phillips of Ole Miss had 12 to be in fourth place, tied actually with Nick Fitzgerald of Mississippi State with 12. Those are your top 5 rushers as far as rushing touchdowns go. In receiving yardage, A.J. Brown of Ole Miss, 1,320 receiving yards this season. Only one other SEC wide receiver had 1,000 yards. That's second place, Jerry Jeudy of Alabama, 1,079 is what he ended with. Kalijah Lipscomb of Vanderbilt had 886 yards. DeMarcus Lodge of Ole Miss, 877. And Deebo Samuel of South Carolina, 849 receiving yards. Oddly enough, in sixth place is Jay Sternberger of Texas A&M, notable, of course, because he is a tight end. So sixth place, the highest tight end in terms of passing or receiving yardage, 804 yards for Sternberger on the season. Jerry Jeudy led the conference in receiving touchdowns with 11. Sternberger is tied with Alabama's tight end, Henry Ruggs III. No, I'm sorry. Henry Ruggs is the wide receiver. It's Irv Smith Jr. It's the juniors and thirds that confused me. But Jay Sternberger and Henry Ruggs are tied with 10 touchdowns apiece. Kalijah Lipscomb and Deebo Samuel of South Carolina tied behind them with 9 receiving touchdowns on the year. As far as some tackles go, you have the leaders in total tackles, that's combining solo and assisted. Dijon Harris of Arkansas led the conference with 118 total tackles. Devin White, the linebacker of LSU, behind them with 115. Ole Miss's Mohamed Sanogo finished a strong campaign with 112 total tackles. Jordan Griffin of Vanderbilt had 110 behind them, and Deshaun Davis of Auburn, 103 in fifth place. Those are also the only 5 players in the conference to top 100 total tackles on the year. Josh Allen of Kentucky led the conference with 19 tackles for loss. Ja'Kai Polite of Florida, 18 tackles for loss behind him. Quinnen Williams of Alabama, 16 behind them. Jeffrey Simmons, 16 as well, tackles for loss. This is off of sportsreference.com, which tends to round these numbers to even numbers and not put like half tackles for loss, half sacks, all of that, which is why Jeffrey Simmons is listed as having 16 tackles for loss here, when, as mentioned earlier, that was not the number given when talking about him as Defensive Lineman of the Week. Anyway, fifth place is Otaro Alaka of Texas A&M with 15 tackles for loss. Josh Allen also ended up leading the conference in sacks with 14. Montez Sweat of Mississippi State was behind him with 12. Polite of Florida, 11. Isaiah Buggs of Alabama is in fourth place with 10. And Darrell Taylor of Tennessee with 8. Grant Dale Pete led the conference in interceptions with 5. Jojon Williams of Vanderbilt had 4. And then a big tie in third place with 3 interceptions apiece. Here's all those names. John Battle of LSU, DeMarcus Acey of Missouri, Darius West of Kentucky, Rashad Fenton of South Carolina, Ryan Pooley of Arkansas, Savion Smith of Alabama, Bryce Thompson of Tennessee, and Frank Coppett of Vanderbilt. And as far as passes defended, which is one of my favorite stats because it really shows you how well someone is in coverage, more so than interceptions do. It was a tie for the most passes defended. Number one was held between is a tie between Auburn's Noah Igbinoghene with 11 and Missouri's Christian Holmes also with 11. DeMarcus Acey of Missouri and Jojuan Williams of Vanderbilt are tied behind them with 10. And then 4 players have 9 passes defended on the year. That's Grant Dale Pete of Louisiana State, Andres Williams of LSU as well, DeAndre Baker of Georgia, Christian Fulton of LSU, my goodness, that LSU secondary or something else, and Cameron Dantzler of Mississippi State. Those are all 9 passes defended. And that's it. That's going to be the Week 13 in numbers game, and the last time that we look at these total numbers on the season, because the regular season is behind us. Well, except for South Carolina playing Akron. So, there's that, I guess. Anyway, I'm your friend Joseph Craven. This has been the Numbers Game. I will catch you later on, and be sure to tune in once again on Tuesday when we actually release our end of the regular season episode, or Week 13. Not really the end of the regular season recap, but end of Week 13 episode of Running on the Clock. See you later.